Richard Haller was the man everyone admired, a wealthy businessman with power, generosity, and a picture-perfect life, while Vanessa Halle was the glamorous wife admired for her beauty but behind their mansion's polished walls. Vanessa was secretly plotting a sinister plan that would end with Richard's brutal murder and the shocking truth that no one in Oak Ridge ever saw coming. Richard Hale's name carried weight in Oak Ridge. He wasn't just another wealthy man tucked away in a mansion. He was the kind of figure people pointed to as proof that success and generosity could exist in the same person. His chain of luxury hotels stretched across several states, making him a millionaire many times over, yet he was remembered just as much for funding scholarships, building a community center, and quietly paying off hospital bills for families who couldn't afford them. His life seemed larger than the town itself, and the Halle mansion on the hill was a physical reminder of his power and fortune. It was a sprawling estate with manicured gardens, fountains, and long driveways lined with imported trees that locals would drive past just to admire. People often said Richard had everything a man could want: wealth, influence, and a young, beautiful wife who completed the picture of perfection. Vanessa Halle stood out wherever she went. With her striking looks, designer clothing, and magnetic presence, she was impossible to ignore. In social circles, she shined as the glamorous half of the Halle marriage, the woman draped in diamonds, always smiling in photographs beside her husband. Friends described her as charming, though not much was truly known about her life before Richard. She rarely spoke of her past, as though she had been reborn the moment she married into wealth. To the public, she seemed devoted to her husband, appearing arm in arm with him at every charity, gala, and business dinner. If Richard was the symbol of success, Vanessa was the crown jewel that completed the image. But wealth often hides fractures that outsiders can't see. Inside the grand estate, the dynamic between Richard and Vanessa wasn't nearly as flawless as the photographs suggested. Richard was a man of discipline, shaped by decades of building his empire from the ground up. He demanded order in his business and carried that same rigid expectation into his marriage. He kept meticulous control over finances, schedules, and appearances. Vanessa, however, wasn't made for rules and structure. She was impulsive, drawn to pleasures that burned through money faster than Richard could imagine. The thrill of casinos, secret shopping sprees, and hidden nights at private clubs became her escape from the monotony she felt under her husband's watchful eye. What Richard saw as careless spending, Vanessa saw as freedom, and when he tightened his grip, monitoring her expenses more closely, her resentment grew. She began to view the marriage less as a partnership and more as a prison gilded in gold, though she still smiled for the cameras and played the role of the loyal wife. Behind closed doors, she was restless, craving independence at any cost. The very life that others envied, the mansion, the luxury, the spotlight, had started to feel suffocating. The deeper her debts became, the more desperate her thoughts turned. Friends noticed subtle changes, a sharper edge to her personality, an impatience lurking beneath her charm. No one realized it then, but Vanessa's dissatisfaction was evolving into something far darker. She was no longer just unhappy with her husband. She was beginning to imagine a future without him at all. And with her debts mounting and her patience waning, the seeds of a plan began to take root in her mind. One that would eventually shock the entire town and unravel the perfect image of Oak Ridge's golden couple. The discovery of Richard Hale's body sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge. The man who had seemed untouchable was found lifeless in his own home, in the very study where he conducted his empire. It was late evening when police arrived at the mansion, responding to a frantic call that came not from a neighbor or security guard, but from Vanessa herself. She told them she had come downstairs after hearing a noise, only to find her husband slumped over his desk. To the officers who first entered the room, the sight was unforgettable. Richard's body bore multiple stab wounds, his blood pooled across the expensive hardwood floor. The brutality of the attack didn't align with the image of a respected businessman. This was no precise assassination, no clean job by a professional. This was rage, hatred, and something deeply personal. What immediately puzzled investigators was the state of the room. Despite the violent act, there were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no smashed windows. The house alarm had never been triggered. Whoever committed the crime had either been let in willingly or already lived inside the mansion. Even stranger, none of Richard's valuables had been taken. His watch remained on his wrist, his wallet untouched, and the safe in the study sat unopened. Robbery was ruled out within minutes, leaving detectives to wonder who would want Richard dead, and why. Their attention naturally shifted to Vanessa. She appeared distraught, though not in the way grieving spouses usually were. Her tears came without the trembling panic most displayed. Her answers to police questions were steady, rehearsed almost as if she had prepared for this moment long before it happened. She claimed she had been upstairs in her bedroom for the last 2 hours, only coming down when she heard something unusual. But forensic experts quickly raised doubts. The time of death suggested Richard had been killed at least an hour before she placed the emergency call. That gap in time became the first red flag. Even more curious was her appearance. For someone who had discovered her husband's mutilated body, Vanessa's clothing was spotless. There was no trace of blood on her gown, no signs that she had even touched him. Detectives noted the unusual calmness in her voice, as though she had rehearsed her grief. For a woman whose future had just changed in an instant, she seemed far too composed. As investigators began piecing together the night, the question of motive emerged. Richard's will was reviewed, and it revealed a striking detail. In the event of his death, Vanessa would inherit nearly everything. The sprawling estate, the fortune, and complete control of the hotel chain. Suddenly, her image as the heartbroken widow shifted in the eyes of detectives. She wasn't just a grieving wife. She was the sole heir to a fortune worth millions. The case quickly captured media attention. News crews set up outside the Holly mansion, eager to broadcast every development. Neighbors whispered their suspicions, though few could believe Vanessa capable of violence. To the cameras, she remained the elegant widow, hiding her sorrow behind dark sunglasses and carefully chosen words. But to the investigators, she had become the prime suspect. Every detail of her story was under scrutiny, and every inconsistency pushed them closer to a chilling conclusion. The perfect life Vanessa displayed to the world may have been a carefully crafted lie, and Richard S. murder was beginning to look less like a tragedy and more like the execution of a sinister plan. As investigators pressed deeper into Vanessa Hale's world, the picture of a devoted wife began to crumble. Bank statements revealed transactions that Richard had never authorized, tens of thousands spent in casinos, luxury boutiques, and high-end clubs scattered across neighboring cities. She had been careful to keep these indulgences hidden, opening secret credit cards and using false addresses, but the paper trail was undeniable. For a woman married to a millionaire, it was shocking how far into debt she had fallen. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Vanessa had been living a double life. The most alarming discovery came in the form of phone records, late-night calls, sometimes lasting hours, connected her to a man named Julian Cross. He wasn't a wealthy businessman, nor was he someone respectable in society. Julian was a gambler with a reputation for trouble. A man who drifted between shady card games and underground dealings. His criminal record was littered with charges ranging from fraud to assault, though none had ever put him behind bars for long. When detectives realized how often Vanessa had contacted him in the weeks before Richard's murder, suspicion turned into certainty that she wasn't grieving the way she claimed. She was hiding something. Tracking Julian proved difficult. His apartment was abandoned, his belongings gone, as if he had vanished overnight. His car was found near a bus terminal miles away, its trunk emptied. Neighbors told detectives they had seen a woman matching Vanessa's description visiting him regularly. The visits became more frequent in the month leading up to Richard's death, often late at night when Richard was away on business. It was no longer speculation. Vanessa had been leading a secret life, and Julian was at the center of it. Meanwhile, Richard's closest business associates came forward with troubling information. In the weeks before his death, Richard had grown suspicious of his wife. He had confided that he believed Vanessa was hiding things from him, and he was considering revising his will to protect his fortune. He had even spoken of hiring private investigators to follow her, fearing betrayal. If he had gone through with those changes, Vanessa would have been left with far less than she expected. The timing of his murder, coming just as Richard was preparing to cut her out, seemed far too convenient to ignore. Detectives began piecing the puzzle together. The financial troubles, the secret affair, the looming threat of losing her inheritance all pointed to motive. But motive alone was not enough. They needed proof that Vanessa had been directly involved in planning Richard's death. So far, the crime scene itself was frustratingly clean. The knife was wiped of prints. The room held no clear signs of struggle beyond the attack. And Vanessa's alibi, while suspicious, was still plausible without hard evidence. As pressure mounted, investigators found themselves drawn back to Julian. If Vanessa had manipulated him into carrying out the murder, he was the missing link that could unravel the entire case. But with him gone, they were left chasing shadows. Every lead felt like it ended in smoke, and Vanessa carried on with her public role as the grieving widow, attending memorial services with carefully rehearsed sorrow. Yet behind her, calm facade, the truth was inching closer. The investigators were convinced this was not the act of a stranger, nor a random crime. It was a carefully orchestrated betrayal, and Vanessa Halley was standing at the center of it. The break investigators had been waiting for came from the most unlikely source, a gas station. Security camera located miles away from the Halley mansion. While combing through hours of footage from the night of Richard's death, detectives spotted a woman who looked remarkably like Vanessa. She wore a blonde wig, oversized sunglasses, and a scarf that covered part of her face. But her height, build, and even her distinctive designer handbag gave her away. The footage showed her purchasing gasoline and filling a small red container before driving off into the night. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was evidence that she had been out of the house during the crucial hours she claimed to have been upstairs alone. The footage destroyed her alibi, opening a crack in the wall she had built around herself. Forensic teams revisited a car, which had been initially cleared during the first sweep. This time, they used more advanced testing methods. Under ultraviolet light, faint stains were discovered in the trunk, stains that turned out to be blood. Though degraded, DNA confirmed it belonged to Richard. Traces of gasoline were also detected, matching what she had purchased that night. Investigators now believed Vanessa had planned to burn or dispose of evidence, but changed course at the last moment. The carefully staged crime scene inside the mansion suddenly looked less like a mystery and more like the result of a detailed but flawed plan. Detectives began reconstructing the timeline. Vanessa lured Richard into his study, likely keeping him distracted until Julian arrived. The stabbing was brutal, and in the chaos, she stayed away from the immediate scene, ensuring her clothes were free of blood. Afterward, she drove Julian away from the mansion, carrying evidence of the attack in her trunk. Her plan may have seemed airtight in her mind, but arrogance had led her to overlook the tiniest details. The surveillance camera at the gas station, the microscopic blood residue, the digital trail of her secret finances. Each mistake became another nail in her carefully constructed defense. As suspicion mounted, investigators obtained a warrant for Vanessa's arrest. The once glamorous widow appeared in court, surrounded by a team of expensive lawyers determined to shield her from the growing mountain of evidence. Her demeanor remained polished, her tone calm, and she continued to portray herself as a victim of cruel circumstances. But even her legal team could not explain away the damning testimony that soon followed. Detectives had located Julian Cross hiding in another state, living under a false name. Julian's capture unraveled the final layer of Vanessa's deception. Under interrogation, he admitted everything. He told investigators that Vanessa had seduced and manipulated him, promising wealth and freedom if he helped her eliminate Richard. She had laid out the details of the plan with precision, even rehearsing what she would say to police once the murder was discovered. Julian explained how she directed him through every step, from entering the mansion to carrying out the stabbing, and how she promised to secure his escape afterward. His account matched the evidence perfectly, from the gas station footage to the stains in Vanessa's trunk. The confession left no room for doubt. Vanessa Halley was no longer seen as a grieving widow. She was exposed as the architect of a brutal crime. A woman who valued fortune and independence over loyalty and life. Her downfall was not the brilliance of investigators alone, but her own arrogance in believing she could hide forever behind a flawless image. As the case moved toward trial, the facade she had carefully built over years of marriage collapsed, leaving only the chilling reality of a plan that had turned greed into murder. The trial of Vanessa Halley became a national spectacle, the kind of case that captivated audiences far beyond Oak Ridge. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, broadcasting daily updates as though it were a high-profile drama. The elegant widow who had once charmed the town now entered courtrooms in modest black dresses. Her makeup toned down, her posture carefully measured to evoke sympathy. Yet behind the image her defense team tried to maintain, the prosecution was building a narrative so strong that not even Vanessa's poise could withstand it. The prosecutors portrayed her as a calculating woman who had orchestrated her husband's murder to secure both freedom and fortune. They laid out every piece of evidence in meticulous detail. The gas station footage played on a large screen for the jury, showing Vanessa disguised in her wig and sunglasses, buying gasoline on the night of the killing. Forensic experts described the faint traces of Richard's blood discovered in her car, explaining how the stains were nearly invisible but conclusive under testing. Financial records were displayed, exposing the trail of hidden debts and reckless spending that Richard had never known about. Piece by piece, the illusion of Vanessa's perfect marriage crumbled. The most devastating blow came from Julian Cross. Brought into court under heavy guard, he appeared as the prosecution's key witness. His testimony was blunt, unapologetic, and chilling. He told the jury how Vanessa had approached him, how she dangled promises of wealth if he did what she asked, and how she carefully mapped out Richard's murder down to the last detail. He described how she had given him access to the mansion, reassured him that she would provide an alibi, and even rehearsed the story she would later tell police. He admitted to carrying out the stabbing, but insisted that without Vanessa's manipulation and promise of reward, he never would have committed the crime. The defense fought hard to discredit him. They painted Julian as a liar, desperate for a lighter sentence, a career criminal willing to say anything to save himself. They reminded the jury that he, not Vanessa, had physically carried out the murder. But the problem for Vanessa's lawyers was that his story aligned too perfectly with the evidence. Every detail he provided matched what investigators had already uncovered. From the gasoline purchase to the blood in the trunk, his confession might have been self-serving, but it was also undeniably true. Throughout the trial, Vanessa maintained her composure. She sat still, her expression unreadable, never allowing anger or panic to show. Yet jurors noticed the coldness in her demeanor, the absence of genuine grief for her husband. To them, she did not look like a woman wrongfully accused. She looked like someone who believed she was smarter than everyone else in the room. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict was unanimous: guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. When the sentence was read, life in prison without the possibility of parole, Vanessa showed no tears, no outburst, only a faint tightening of her jaw. Julian received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, sealing the deal that would keep Vanessa behind bars forever. The case left Oak Ridge stunned. Richard Hawley was remembered as a generous man whose life was stolen by the person he trusted most. His murder became a cautionary tale about greed, betrayal, and the dangers of appearances. Vanessa, once admired for her beauty and charm, was now etched in history as the woman who sacrificed everything, her own freedom, for a sinister plan that unraveled in the end. The Hawley Mansion, once a symbol of wealth and elite, stood as a grim reminder of how quickly a perfect life could descend into darkness, and how the pursuit of fortune at any cost could destroy everything in its path.